Notice this weather system waiting out in the west. That's going to fringe south coastal parts as we go through Sunday night. Otherwise, for many through Sunday night, yes, there'll be some clear spells. Also, some showery rain, sleet or snow across some northern parts could lead to something of an ice risk here. And snow showers piling in from the north across parts of Scotland. These totals could build up as we go through the night. It is going to be a cold night, even in the south. Some places falling below freezing. Could get as low as -10 in the sheltered parts of Scotland. The rain, sleet and snow across parts of the southeast could cause some problems early doors, but that will clear away as we go through the morning. Otherwise then, through Monday, for many, it is going to be largely dry with lots of winter sunshine around. Yes, there'll be some showers towards the east and also plenty of showers towards parts of Scotland, and here they are readily going to be falling as snow. But for many, largely dry with sunny spells. Despite that, though, it's cold. Colder than today for most places, generally staying in mid-single figures Celsius. Little change for many as we go through Monday evening, and so most places staying largely clear, but continue to see snow showers across parts of Scotland, and then some showery rain, sleet and snow starting to push in from the southwest as we go through the night. Need to keep an eye on this because there could be some significant snow across some southwestern parts as we go through the early hours of Tuesday. It is going to be a colder night than this coming night for many, could even get as low as -11 or -12 perhaps in the sheltered glens of Scotland. Through Tuesday then, a cold, frosty, icy start for many of us first thing. Watch out for this showery rain, sleet and snow across southern parts. A little bit of uncertainty regarding how much snow we're going to see, but it is worth keeping up to date with that. There'll be further wintry weather as we go through the rest of the week, perhaps drier on Thursday, but staying cold. Bye-bye for now. See you later.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Police are still searching for the gunman behind yesterday's suspected drive-by shooting in central London. A 7-year-old girl remains in a critical condition after being shot outside a church near Euston Station. 4 women and a second child, aged 12, were also taken to hospital, with one of them suffering life-changing injuries. Police say shots were fired from a moving black Toyota as mourners left a funeral service. Superintendent Jack Rowlands is urging witnesses to come forward.
We believe the suspects discharged a shotgun from a moving vehicle, which was a black Toyota CHR. We want to hear from anyone who witnessed the incident or has information about it.
At least 68 people have been killed when a domestic plane crashed in Nepal, the country's worst aviation disaster in 3 decades. 72 people were on board the Yeti Airlines flight that crashed in Pokhara during clear skies. Those on board included passengers from India, Ireland, Australia and France. All but 4 of the bodies have been recovered. The search operation has been paused until tomorrow morning. Sir Keir Starmer is calling for an overhaul of the NHS, saying it must reform or it will die. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, he says a Labour government would turn GPs into direct NHS employees, rather than allowing them to run their own practices. He also announced plans to allow some patients, such as those with back pain, to self-refer themselves to specialists.
We'll double the number of medical students using money from abolishing the non-dom status for the super rich, but also we need to look at the way GPs operate and see whether we can't make changes there, things which will actually preserve the NHS going forward. At the moment, what the government's doing is really just presiding over managed decline, and that I will not accept. Of course there will be, challenges whenever you reform something, but frankly, if you don't reform the NHS, then I fear it will die.
At least 30 people have been killed and 30 more are being treated in hospital after a Russian missile strike hit an apartment building in central Ukraine. Rescue efforts are continuing, with officials saying a further 40 people could still be trapped under the rubble. Yesterday, Russia launched a major missile attack on Ukraine, striking vital energy facilities across the country. Authorities say the coming days will be difficult, with threats to the supply of electricity, water and heating, all during the height of winter. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's time for Free Speech Nation.
A professor specialising in human rights is bullied off campus, Sir Francis Drake is cancelled, and the Brit Awards go gender neutral and give all the prizes to men. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. On tonight's show, I'm going to be joined by the author who says woke ideology leads directly to anti-Semitism. We'll talk about the secondary school where pupils have been banned from holding hands. And we'll discuss whether the BBC should have recorded a 10-part podcast with jihadi bride Shamima Begum. But my student guests this evening are the wonderful Leo Kearse and Josh Howitt. Welcome both. How are we this evening?
Yeah,
you
good,
okay?
thanks.
Yeah?
Yep.
What about you, Josh?
Very well, in the middle of taxes.
Oh, you're doing that? I got an accountant to deal with that. Is that fancy?
Yeah.
Well, is it?
I don't even have a calculator. I've just got, numbers stuck to the fridge.
Trust me, if I didn't have an accountant, I'd be in prison for fraud. I'd get it wrong. I wouldn't be able to do it. Anyway, we're going to get some questions from our lovely audience. We're going to start with a question from Pete. Where is Pete? Hello, Pete.
Should secondary school pupils be allowed to hug each other?
OK, so this is a school in Chelmsford where pupils have been banned from having romantic relationships, but they've also been banned from hugging and even holding hands. This is a place called Highlands School. Leo, it seems a bit harsh, this, doesn't it?
Well, it really depends who's filming them. I mean, I can see, this would make sense in certain situations, but no, I mean, we need to touch each other as a human. As part of the human condition, we need to touch each other.
And teachers and pupils.
Not so much that. Pupils should be allowed to touch each other. I mean, so many school ground games are based on touching each other. There's the one where you have sort of piggyback. I don't know if that's an offensive term now. There's
offensive to pigs.
Yeah, there's British bulldog. That's offensive to dogs and British people. But yeah, there's all these things where you've got to be able to play tag. You've got to touch someone to play tag. What are you going to do?
It's inhumane, isn't it, Josh? I mean, you say about this isn't about teachers. Actually, this is about pupils having physical contact with other pupils. But at the same time, I mean, I used to work in a boarding school. I remember we had a training session. What do you do if a child is is crying because their parents have just been killed in an accident, do you just say, oh, no, I can't put an arm around this child? That would be ridiculous, right? There are circumstances where there has to be some sort of physical...
Absolutely, but also between people like high-fiving or anything like that. Just to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater is totally ridiculous. Mind you, I went to boarding school where I got beaten up regularly, hence the reason I am the way I am. So actually, no touching would have been a policy that I would appreciate.
But couldn't it just be...
You're not allowed to touch me! Stop punching me in the face!
Yes, because bullies always obey the rules,
yes,
don't they? Couldn't no hitting cover that? That would have covered it, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, but the other thing is that a lot of pupils, you know, with the lockdowns going on about it, but they spent 2 years, as a society, not touch each other. And as Leo says, human contact is part of what makes us human. So I think that actually school is a great place to learn the appropriate way to touch each other. Just banning it outright is the wrong way to go. You should say if someone is inappropriate, that's when you go, you know what, this is why it is, and explain it to them.
I think that's fair enough. We're going to get another question now from Danny. Hello, Danny. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, it's a question that's probably on everybody's lips at the moment. It's, are fields racist?
Are fields racist? Well, you know, I've been keeping a long list of all the things that are racist in the media. Fields is the latest one. This is a university in the United States that has put out a statement saying they're removing the word field from the curriculum. This is the University of Southern California's School of Social Work. And they've said they're going to use the word practicum instead of field. What do you make of this one?
Practicum is when Optimus Prime has an orgasm. Yeah, this is ridiculous. They're just finding more and more things to find racist, because the only way you can sort of point out that you're a good person is by finding something racist. But the supply of racism isn't keeping up with the demand, so you've got to find ridiculous things that obviously aren't racist, like the word field.
So what's the logic here? Is the logic here that slaves once worked in fields? And therefore fields are what?
Well, and also there was, there are the sort of racially loaded terms of field and house. For different types of slave. So, I can understand that, but, that's not the word field isn't the sort of racist thing there.
But no, well, quite, because, slaves were also building railroads. Is the word train racist? I don't understand how this works.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, OK.
I'm surprised you didn't get that memo.
Oh, right, sorry.
But it's like Leo was saying, but I'd say it's even a tiny bit more insidious, is that these companies or people are now being paid a lot of money to go in and de-racist institutions. And if there isn't the racism there, they can't just come out a report at the end of it after this, the University of California spent $100,000 or whatever, say, oh, no, you guys are great. You're brilliant. Well done. Keep up the good work. No, they got to put something down, and they're like, oh, field. That's it. Yeah.
So it's almost to justify their own salaries and existence.
Of course it is. Yeah.
I find that so depressing, because I remember there was this study in The Guardian, and it was about the degree of racism on university campuses, and the stats they quoted found that there was barely any. Like it was really, really rare, and so they picked on the very few incidents there were and said, look how terrible racism is on campus. You would have thought they would want to say, we've made so much progress, guys. This is amazing.
They want to sell newspapers, and these people want to keep their jobs. And also, this is goes to something that you've talked about before, about this whole idea that they're the priest class where they have this sort of speciality language.
Yeah.
So now if someone dares to go in and say, oh, what field work did you go? Oh, no, you can't say that. And it allows them to justify their superiority.
It's about power, which is an odd one, isn't it? Because they're the ones who claim that they're trying to break down power structures and other people's privilege, but they are wielding so much power and control.
And they're the people with the most privilege and the most power. Any sort of equality, diversity and inclusion department has the power to fire whoever it wants. They get paid huge sums of money, and the ability, even in the letter that this university wrote, they specifically said they're changing language. Imagine having the power to change language.
That's pretty intense. And they don't address actual examples of systemic racism. Like in American universities, if you are from an Asian Pacific background, it's harder for you to get in because they require that you get higher marks.
Yeah.
And that's actual racism.
And the Asian people from Asian background who work in a field have got it even doubly hard.
Oh, it's really hard for those people. Anyway, we're going to move on now to another question from Mary.
Hi.
Hello, Mary.
Is the anti-JK Rowling hysteria getting out of control?
Well, the anti-JK Rowling hysteria has been out of control for a while, I think. But this week, there was this story which has just taken it to a whole new level. This is a bookbinder. And what this guy has done is he's rebound the Harry Potter books and taken her name off the Harry Potter books, even though she wrote them, right? This is... Surely people are going to be piqued off the back of it. This is so extreme now, just completely erasing it.
It's more than it's extreme, it's offensive. You're removing the artist, the person who deserves the credit. There she was, a single mum, writing this in a cafe. to take and like to pretend that makes anything. To be fair, what would have been a good idea would when Harry Potter came out and it was this big hit, and then everybody was reading it like adults. I wish that there'd been like a cover without Harry Potter on the front, so I could have read it on the tube and not look like a child.
Yeah, but Josh, they did have separate covers for adults back in the day. So they had the paperback version with the cartoony cover, and then they had the one with the more sort of earnest sepia.
Yeah.
But it was still clearly
But I would still hide that behind pornography.
What do you make of this one, Leo?
I honestly think it's great. I mean, capitalism always wins, and this person has found a loophole in the market. These gullible people are so anti-J.K. Rowling, they'll pay £170 for a new cover for their stupid child's book. I mean, that is an absolute nonsense.
Is it legal for him to take the name off?
Sure, why not? Why would it be illegal to not put a name on something you're selling?
Well, selling someone else's book as though they're not attached to it. I think there might be a copyright issue there.
When you sell an iPhone cover, does it have to have Steve Jobs' name on it?
I think that's very different, Leo. Obviously so I'm not even going to explain it. Let's move on now to a final question from Christian. Where's Christian?
I've got a difficult one. Should Shamima Begum be forgiven?
Should Shamima Begum be forgiven? As you know, this is the jihadi bride who left to join ISIS when she was 15 years old, and she's now... is this right? She's got a podcast?
You know what? This story really annoys me because of the way it's being presented. There's a podcast about her that she is on, and everyone say, oh, the BBC have given her own podcast. No, this is the whole point of like investigative journalism. I want to hear about her story. I want to find out how she got radicalized, what her life is. How can we learn from those mistakes from the horse's mouth? If it was just her to present her narrative unchallenged, I'd go, yeah, fair enough. But it's not like she opens up going, welcome to the Shamima Show, and then just gets to sort of say whatever she wants. It'd be interesting. But to actually hear, and also this is what goes back to free speech, let people damn themselves with their own words. She's talking about arrows and how they don't have suites in Syria where she went to, where people have been beheaded, where there's slavery, forced rape and all these things, and she's going about how it's a tragedy they didn't have suites and stuff. That's damning her with her own words.
But you think it's damning her with their own words, but the Guardian are pumping out articles saying, oh my God, they don't have arrows in Syria for ISIS brides. We need to supply. Probably. I think, I mean, this is a 10-part series dedicated to Shamima, like with her in every episode. And I got kicked off the BBC. I was on a BBC radio show, had a regular slot in it, on Nihal's show in 5 Live. I was kicked off when they found out I was right-wing, but they're happy to platform somebody who's literally in ISIS.
You were kicked off a show for being right-wing?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, I mean, Leo makes a good case.
Change your name to Shamina.
That would be good. That would suit you, actually. Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the human rights professor who was attacked by trans rights protesters at a Canadian university earlier this week. I'll be back in 3 minutes.
This year on GB News, we've got
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A human rights law professor was prevented from giving a speech this week by trans rights protesters. Professor Robert Wintermute was due to speak at McGill University in Canada about how trans rights can potentially infringe on women's rights. But more than 100 protesters gathered at the venue and the speech did not go ahead. Here's what happened on Tuesday. I'm delighted to say that Professor Robert Wintermute joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, one of the major issues that people have with these kinds of trans activist protesters is that they can be quite intimidating, quite intolerant. The footage there would seem to validate that point, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Before the seminar, at least two newspapers in Montreal warned people that a controversial speaker was coming to McGill University. So I did have a controversial message, which is that women have human rights too.
Right.
But most women are too afraid to speak up because of the intimidation of the transgender rights movement. So what happened on Tuesday was that I got a first-hand experience of that intimidation.
So, in other words, these protesters here proved your point?
They did, absolutely.
Can you just give us some background into what your talk was going to be about here?
The title was The Sex versus Gender Identity Debate in the United Kingdom and the Divorce of LGB from T.
Right.
And I had given this talk at King's College London, at universities in Barcelona and Bologna, and a grand total of 0 protesters were present.
Right. But then here, there were a lot. Why is that? Is that because Canada is particularly sensitive around these issues?
Yes, and I think actually the one thing that was different this time was in the publicity I mentioned LGB Alliance, which is portrayed around the world as an anti-trans hate group, equivalent, similar to the Ku Klux Klan, if not the Nazi Party.
And that is ridiculous because, of course, it's not remotely anti-trans. And whenever you ask someone to give some evidence of that, they never can because it isn't. It's a kind of hysteria, isn't it?
A complete hysteria. And what I worked out in Montreal is LGB Alliance does not promote hatred of transgender people, but the transgender rights movement promotes hatred of LGB Alliance.
Can you explain that to us? Because a lot of people will be confused here. How is it the case that gender identity ideology poses any kind of threat to gay rights?
Well, it's, the reason they promote hatred of LGB Alliance is that LGB Alliance has committed the crime of high treason. The organization has done that by distancing itself from the transgender rights movement and reserving the right to disagree on some issues. And for that, the transgender rights movement insists on severely punishing LGBT Alliance by falsely labeling it an anti-trans hate group around the world.
But is it not the case? I mean, gay rights was secured on the basis of the recognition that some people are attracted to members of their own sex. But gender identity ideology kind of seeks to override that and sort of suggests that actually it's not about same-sex attraction, it's about same-gendered attraction, which isn't something that most people recognise because most people don't have a gender identity. Would you say that's right?
Yes, I would say that's right.
And in the same way, how does this impact on women's rights? I mean, I've had many feminists on the show talking about how they need to recognise biological reality of sex differences, otherwise their single-sex spaces won't be preserved. Is that the experience you've had?
Yes. In my talk, I was planning to include the many areas of agreement. So no violence, harassment against transgender people, no employment discrimination where their birth sex is not relevant, etc.
Yes.
So there are wide areas of agreement. We're really talking about exceptional situations, single-sex spaces, positive action for women, and which includes sports. So it's a fairly narrow area, but it's an area where the transgender rights claim affects women. So the analogy I use is one person says, "You're standing on my foot," and the other says, "You hate me and you want to kill me, and that's why you're complaining about my foot."
I understand.
Yeah. First person says, "No, it's just your foot, really."
Yes.
But it's this hysterical reaction. The letter to McGill University said that if I was allowed to speak, it would be contributing to the genocide of trans people around the world.
Why is this language so extreme? I mean, I heard in the video with the protesters, there was someone screaming, "You're erasing my existence."
Erasing my existence, yeah.
But you've just explained that you are supportive of trans rights and certainly you would say that there needs to be measures to prevent discrimination against trans people. That's your view. So how is that erasing someone's existence? I don't understand that.
Well, there's nothing done. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's a kind of insecurity about the arguments supporting their cause.
Yes.
And instead of engaging in reasoned debate, they just cry genocide at the slightest criticism.
I mean, it just strikes me as so incredible. Well, it's beyond hyperbolic, isn't it, that kind of idea? And you were out there, you were in the middle of these protesters. They seem very shrill, they seem very intimidating. How does it feel to be in the middle of that kind of tempest?
It was intimidating. As I walked to the seminar room, they were shouting, "Shame on you." Once inside, the chant became, "F your system, F your hate, trans rights are not up for debate." And they were trying to make enough noise to drown me out inside so the people attending couldn't hear me. And we tried to continue as long as we could. And then at one moment, I saw a student with an object near the glass in the door. I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to smash the glass. Unfortunately, didn't, but they continued to push until they got into the room. They disconnected the video projector and started chanting and shut down the event. But it was in a much smaller form, like Washington, January 2021, Brasilia, January 2023. Completely undemocratic. No one has the right to interfere with another group's meeting just because they disagree with the opinions that are being expressed.
And I suppose because they framed your opinions, well, mischaracterised your opinions to such an extent that they're even using words such as genocide, that is their justification for censorship, isn't it?
It is, and the problem here, I would compare it with what's happened with the term anti-Semitism. It's been deliberately expanded, or there are attempts to expand it, to include any criticism of the government of Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. And you see the same thing with transphobia. Transphobia means hostility towards transgender people, but instead the activists widen it so that it means any disagreement with any demand of the transgender rights movement.
So you're talking here about what they call concept creep, the idea of things just expanding. And you mentioned that phrase, trans rights or human rights, that's what they were shouting. So what do they mean by that? If you're saying the language has become so slippery, and if you're saying they're shouting that because they feel they're right, I mean, it's a sincere belief, isn't it? They feel the rights are being taken away.
Well, trans rights or human rights is very vague. I remember the 1990s would say the same thing, lesbian and gay rights or human rights. You have to get down to the specifics, and sometimes human rights conflict. But actually, I did not hear them chanting that. What I heard them chanting was, trans rights aren't up for debate. So in the UK, there's a hashtag no debate. They refuse to discuss anything.
But what is it they think is up for... What do they think you're trying to debate away? You know, they have the same rights as everyone else, don't they, as far as I'm aware? I would say that anyone who is harassing a trans person or discriminating against them, that does need to be addressed. And it's not up to debate to say that they shouldn't have those rights. But you're not coming in there and saying that those rights should be taken away, are you?
Not at all. But in a democratic society, you have to be able to have debate regarding a law reform issue. Right. So, for example, the Gender Recognition Act. Should it be changed? Should it become easier to change your legal sex? People have different views about that. But saying you oppose reform or amendments to the Gender Recognition Act could lead to you're being called transphobic, just because you disagree with the transgender rights movement.
Is it possible to have adult discussions in the current climate when everyone appears to be using words to mean different things? Is that even possible at this point?
It's difficult, but I think in this particular case, language is being abused in order to shut down debate, to silence people. But the strange result of the action on Tuesday was that actually my message reached many, many more people than it ever would. It was supposed to be an academic seminar, small group of participants. It would go off quietly and have a very small impact on the world. Instead, I was sheltering in the Dean's office and interviewed by the Canadian equivalents of the BBC and ITV television.
Yes. So tell me, there are all sorts of ways in which this language... We were talking earlier in the show about how the word field... Some academics are now saying the word field is an example of racism. When you have situations like that, doesn't that, in a sense, give a cover to real racists? If we can't actually define what racism is, what anti-Semitism is, what transphobia is, what homophobia is, if these words have become slippy and nebulous, doesn't that, in a sense, mean that actual racism, actual anti-Semitism, actual homophobia, they will flourish in those circumstances?
Yes, it tends to dilute the concept, and some people may say, well, racism can't be that bad if the word field is racist, or transphobia can't be that bad if a human rights law professor is accused of it for wanting to raise a few issues.
Well, that's one of the things that a lot of the feminists I've had on the show said to me, you know, that the go-to thing is they're accused of being hateful and transphobic. I haven't, and like I say, I'm sure there are people who are hateful, etc. But they're a very small minority, and it's certainly not the feminists that I've spoken to. And from what you're saying, you know, it's not anyone who was there to see your talk.
Absolutely not, no. It's a false accusation, and it's used to attract a mob of over 100 protesters to chant slogans, but they really had no idea what I was going to say, and they were not interested. They were just wanted to silence me.
Would you have welcomed being challenged verbally?
Absolutely. I was asked to draft a message to students before the event, and I said, if you have concerns, please come and participate in the question and answer period.
Is there anything more that the university could have done? I mean, were they put in a situation where they had to pull the event because of the nature of the response?
To be honest, I've attended 2 LGB Alliance conferences at the Queen Elizabeth Centre opposite Westminster Abbey, and the security arrangements were excellent. Protesters were not allowed inside the building. They protested outside. They were allowed to express their opinion. The problem here was that the protesters were allowed inside the building. So you had over 100 people standing outside the seminar room. That's what caused the problem.
OK, well, I mean, judging from the footage, it does look like quite a frightening event. But thank you very much, Professor, for coming on to talk to me today about it. Really
Thank you.
So after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be getting the reaction to the news that no women have been nominated for the Best Artist Award at the Brits since it went gender neutral. See you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie, and we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So please do email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we will do our best to answer your issues. The organisers of the Brit Awards have been criticised after no women were nominated in the prestigious Artist of the Year category. Until last year, the Brits had categories for Best Male and Best Female Artists, but now they give one gender-neutral prize, and the 5 nominees for the Artist of the Year award all went to men. So to discuss this, I'm joined by the journalist and author Ella Whelan. Ella, thank you for coming. So a lot of people are angry about this, and what they have said is that this has vindicated the need for different gendered categories in the Brit Awards. Do you think that's right?
Well, I mean, clearly, because, you know, I don't think no matter how many kind of frou-frou tops and bras Harry Styles wears, he's quite clearly still in the male category. And, you know, it is an awkward fact that this is the second time that this hasn't worked, because the first time round there was a gender-neutral award was last year when Adele won it, which, you know, OK, I mean, only Adele could win in that category, only she could beat all the other guys, but she said in her speech, by the way, I really like being a woman, I am a woman, so, you know, basically undermining the whole gender-neutral thing.
Yes.
And the fact that there has been no women nominated this time round seems to suggest that either there is somebody having a big joke in the Brits, or there is some kind of a problem which needs to be addressed in relation to letting women have their time.
It feels like they're trolling us a little bit with an all-male shortlist here, but
yeah.
Is it not the case, though? I mean, I often used to think, you know, in the Oscars, for instance, there's a Best Male Actor, Best Female Actor, but acting isn't like a sport where you do need biological sex to be the dividing factor. You know, you can sort of judge a male and female acting together, can't you? I mean, so isn't there an argument for having just scrapping the idea of sex divisions?
Well, yeah. Well, the argument for having sex divisions is that a lot of feminists have come out and said this in criticism of the Brit Awards, is that without they use this kind of horrible corporate feminist language that makes me itch, which is that without access to these spaces that the awards gives you, then women don't earn as much money, they don't get as much record deals and all that kind of thing. And a little bit of me is like, oh, boo-hoo, I don't really, the average woman doesn't really care that much about it. Did you write a good song? No, okay, move on. But there's in terms of comparing voices, you can't really make the argument that there's a sort of womanly way of singing, manly way of singing, unless it's in choral music, where obviously you have sopranos, altos, and tenors and all the rest of it.
Yes.
But in pop music or in contemporary popular kind of culture, I think that we should be rather than moving towards gender neutral, which I think is loaded, because when you think of gender neutral, you kind of think of genderless. It's that kind of like liberal blob of nothingness that exists so much today. But actually saying that there isn't going to be those kind of distinctions. I tend to think that in most areas of life, we put too much emphasis on the idea of sex difference, apart from obvious ones like prison, sport, actually having sex. In generally most, when you're singing in the shower or when you're putting on a play, I think that we can be much more relaxed about the differences.
But it's interesting, isn't it, Ella? Because this has all become a debate about sexism, actually. But it didn't start that way, really. I mean, the idea of a gender-neutral category really came about, I think, because of Sam Smith saying that he identifies as they/them now, as non-binary,
and saying whinging that he couldn't fit anywhere, basically, which was essentially he was demanding his own award, basically, is how it transpired. And there is I think that there's this sort of, you were talking about this with Leo and Josh earlier about, the whole kind of racist fields thing, about the idea that there's not a demand for this kind of thing. I don't think there was a popular surge of people writing into the Brit Awards boards and saying, we really need this to be gender neutralised.
Yes.
What happens is there's a kind of panic about how do we basically avert and avoid a crisis on Twitter when the awards come out? And the funny thing about this is it's completely backfired.
Yes.
Because rather than it, and also it has to be said, there's lots of people saying, well, it's all a bit white, well, it's all a bit samey. And if you engage in and give in to this whole kind of identity politics Olympics in award ceremonies, you're never going to win, because there's always someone who'll say, well, there's not very many one-legged people in the awards this year. Or well, there's not very many ginger people in the awards. It's like you can say anything.
It could be infinite.
Yeah, basically.
But you have, when it comes to the non-binary thing, I mean, with male, female, with racial differences, these are sort of these tangible differences. Non-binary is an ideological thing, a form of self-identification, much like being a goth, say, or something like that, or a religious or a political affiliation. It would be like having an award for Marxist pop stars, wouldn't it? I mean, so why is there so much clout when someone makes that request and says that my identity needs to be validated, even if it's not something that's tangible like sex or race?
I think because it's become the best weapon that you can wield in contemporary politics. I mean, non-binary or gender fluid artists have been around forever. I mean, David Bowie. If you go back through most of the music in the 70s, it was sort of hard to tell who was what.
But those were men and women playing with gender.
Exactly.
They weren't saying they were neither.
Exactly. In terms of the kind of the appearance of people, the way that they sort of walked around in society or performed, there was very little difference. But the difference is that sort of idea of performing or of having a kind of a public life and a private life has completely gone away. And now we have to affirm people's imagination about what is their sort of private life, about what they imagine themselves to be, whether it's a woman or some kind of other pansexual or whatever it is. And it's actually what it does is kind of it means that we don't have any sense of having truths in society and public life, which is that we know that this exists and this exists, the sky is blue, the grass is green, there are men and women, and what you do behind closed doors and what you want to call yourself is your own business, but please don't make it mine. And I think we need, in terms of, what that means for public spaces like award ceremonies or, we have this in relation to discussions about literature prizes and things like that. It comes into conflict with reality, which is unfortunately still that there is a bit of a problem in some of these, particularly like in publishing or other elitist sort of areas, where women do still tend to get a bit of a bum deal. So when when reality bites, we see what really is going on here.
I also wanted to ask you, Ella, about another topic entirely, because you wrote a piece on Spike this week about Andrew Tate and the reaction to Andrew Tate. And it got me thinking, because I was speaking to a teacher friend of mine who said that at his school there was a decree that came down from the headmaster saying that the name must not be mentioned among the children because it will radicalise them into misogyny. Yeah. Is that the right way to deal with this? Apparently, according to your article, this is happening quite a lot in schools.
Yeah, well, there was this big article in the Times Education Supplement which was all about how to instruct teachers how to deal with Andrew Tate and the influence of Andrew Tate. And one of the main things was calling for official CPD training for all schools to be able to deal with Andrew Tate. This is just music to this guy's ears. I mean, I know he's in somewhere, remain in jail somewhere, so he's probably not paying attention to British press, but that's, you know, individuals like Andrew Tate or Julian Blanc before him or any kind of...
And these are influencers who basically...
pick-up artists, they call themselves.
OK, so they're saying to young men, basically, I can teach you how to get women. That's it.
Yeah, but or get rich. It's kind of mainly get-rich scheme, and then there's a little bit of sort of make me a sandwich, darling, in the background of it.
OK.
And it's driving me mad how panicked people are about him, because, number one, you know, truth that was forever thus is that 13-year-old boys, which is sort of the main kind of age category that finds him interesting, are generally idiots. I mean, you know, they're like in the nicest way possible.
Yeah,
they're very immature. They, you know, pick up on stuff. They get obsessed with. There's a reason why so many of them are obsessed with gaming and things like that. They get obsessed with things, and it really is not without, you know, outside of the remit of capabilities of adult society to sort of pull the plug on the laptop and say, like, come back into the real world, guys, because any of the things that Andrew Tate says, whether it's the sandwich thing or he's infamous for saying that women can't fly planes, things like that, all you have to do is to put put that into practice in real life, and maybe say that to a woman, maybe say that to a teenage 13-year-old girl, and see what happens to you when you know,
I suppose their argument is that they would probably agree with you and say that teenage boys are particularly susceptible to influence, and they would say what this is doing is sowing the seeds of misogyny in later life.
Well, there's I think one of the reasons why we're finding it so difficult to get to grips with Andrew Tate, where in previous generations he would have been dismissed outright very quickly.
Yeah.
And people would have got a clip around the ear for saying rude things about women. But the part of the problem is that in sort of today in relationship and sex education lessons and the way we talk about young men and women's relationships, we give this narrative that young men are inherently born with the desire and ability to hurt and rape young girls, and they're sort of conditioned to that from the get-go, and that young women are weaker, they're more emotional and more in need of protection, and they're sort of inherently different, and there are these vices that need to be managed. And, you know, we say, and teachers say, it's OK because we're going to give you consent classes to train you out of that. Andrew Tate comes along and says, I completely agree. Men are dominant, women are weak. Let me offer you a $500 course on how to harness these inherent things that everybody says you have. So actually, the sort of philosophy behind it is very similar. A consent class teacher and Andrew Tate are almost exactly the same in terms of how they view young men and women, but it's just they have different ways of approaching it. And so we need to start saying, actually, to young people, there's nothing destined or predetermined about you and the way you behave. You have to take agency over your own actions.
So you're sort of arguing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a victim-centred feminism, or a feminism that says, yes, women are weaker and need more protection, that's the wrong way to go about this?
Yeah, it's because, well, number one, it's just not true. There is nothing more terrifying and brilliant than a teenage girl. I mean, really, they're something to behold in terms... I mean, I was one of them once, and I remember how awful and, you know, forthright we were. And there's this weird idea that people sort of melt in classrooms, or that they melt in combat with each other, in conversation with each other. You have teachers reporting, female teachers coming forward and saying, I was literally in tears because one of my 12-year-old year 7 or 8 students said to me that I couldn't fly a plane. That was one of them. And you just think, what's wrong with you? You know, get a grip. And I think if we are saying that watching a YouTube video of this guy who really, like, he exists in a YouTube hole, he makes sense, but in reality, he doesn't make sense. And obviously, he's now accused of various things which will hopefully add to people's young boys' sort of sense of who he really might be. All you have to do in order to combat that, there have been, you know, pop stars, can the Kardashians flaunt their wealth online? There's so much going on for young people to get obsessed with. All you have to do is give them something positive to be interested in. And so I think that he should be talked about in schools, but you don't need CPD training. All you need is a teacher with the confidence to say, what about this loser interests you? Like, what about him do you think is going to make you successful? And just have a conversation in reality, rather than write 7 articles about how terrifying he is and, it's also not a kind of coincidence, I think, that this whole panic is happening at the same time that, for example, lots of politicians are going absolutely mental about the online safety bill at the moment. And there's a snowballing effect of young people are being brainwashed by people online. Really, all we have to do is pull the plug and give them a bit of a kick intellectually and maybe physically and say, get interested in something real.
Ella Whelan, thank you so much for joining me. And after the break, I'm going to be finding out why one of Britain's greatest naval heroes has been cancelled by a primary school. Don't go away.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Sir Francis Drake Primary School in South London is changing its name because one of the Spanish Armada heroes links with the slave trade. The school held a vote last year, and 88% of parents, staff, pupils and local residents were in favour of the name change. Head teacher Karen Cartwright said she was thrilled with the result, and it's now going to be known as Twin Oaks Primary School. The Mail Online's history correspondent Harry Howard has written about this story this week, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show. So I want to ask you, Harry, about this. Where does this come from? It's a kind of hysteria at the moment where people are trying to change the past, modify what has been sort of set down for many, many years, and pretend almost like it didn't happen. What's the case in this one?
Well, so with this school, they launched consultation last year. Weirdly, in the letter to parents, they said the governors had already decided to change the name.
Oh, so they'd already made that
preordained, but apparently it was possible that the consultation could decide, actually, no, we want to keep Drake's name.
Yes.
Anyway, so 88% of students and parents decided to change the name, and they opted for Twin Oaks Primary School, which is kind of divorced from, it doesn't really mean anything.
Well, what is the significance? Have they just got 2 oak trees there?
There's 2 oak trees, and I think it probably escaped their notice. I don't know if you've read Gone with the Wind, but the plantation in that, where there's slaves, is called 12 Oaks, so they're kind of 10 oaks away from another slightly...
They should have read that book.
Yes, they should have done, yeah.
So this is a bizarre one, though, as well, because, Sir Francis Drake, the thing that we remember him for is the defeat of the Spanish Armada and circumnavigating the globe.
Yeah.
It isn't for his involvement with the slave trade. When he was a young man in his 20s, he was a crew member. It was John Hawkins' slave voyage. He was a crew member. So that, it seems, given the time period and the ethical values of the time, it seems a bit tenuous.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, he went on 3 voyages with Hawkins, who was a cousin of his. And obviously they did capture and sell a lot of Africans, and obviously that, to us, is utterly abhorrent. But, we've got to put it in the context of the time. The fact that he was ambushed by the Spanish, narrowly survived, and then renounced slavery, and then devoted his time to getting revenge on the Spanish. And in his circumnavigation of the globe, one of his closest people on his ship was a former slave called Diego, who had decided to join Drake's company and was a fully paid member of the ship's crew, was actually key when they went to Panama in recruiting a load of former slaves on the island to help fight against the Spanish. So, I mean, if we're talking about someone living nearly 500 years ago, I'd say that's actually quite interesting, really, that this man had a former slave among his ship's company.
Well, it's just the history is complex.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, if we would have been born in the 16th century, we would have very different ideas about the world than we currently do. And this idea that the name Sir Francis Drake, that because the school was called that, it must be glorifying slavery and saying slavery is a good thing. I've never met anyone who thinks slavery is a good thing. I don't think such people exist in this country, do they?
Well, I don't think so. I think if you go to certain parts of the world, it's still practiced, but
yes,
definitely not here, and it's not acceptable. And Drake was very much a product of his time. But as I said, a complicated character, and no one is, we can't really look back at the past with sort of 21st century spectacles on.
But we seem increasingly determined to do so. And where does this end? I mean, if we take the second voyage, I know was part funded by Queen Elizabeth I, do we therefore have to remove her image, which is everywhere, let's face it? There's a statue on Fleet Street. The oldest statue in London is of Queen Elizabeth I. Do we start removing these as well? I mean, where does this take us?
Well, it literally, I mean, it doesn't... I can't see where it stops, because if you go back far enough, literally anyone has got this kind of dubious, something that we, with our very good morals now, can see was wrong. Even Churchill. And where does it stop, really? Yeah.
Are you concerned as well about this tendency, not just with Drake, but with statues, for instance, of actually taking statues down, pretending that these things didn't occur? I mean, what does that do to our understanding of history, do you think?
Well, I think it divorces us from history. Obviously, Britain and England are more than 1,000 years of history here, and to change the name of a school to Twin Oaks, it means nothing, and it's the same. You're essentially kind of separating yourself off from the past, and I think that's a bad thing.
Do we know how people at the school have reacted? Do you think there has been? I mean, the survey would seem to suggest that there is overwhelming support for this kind of revisionist approach. I mean, does that trouble you at all?
It troubles me in the sense that I seriously... I approached Lewisham Council for a comment because they are in charge of the school, and they said there was a whole school project about Drake to kind of understand him. But, I somewhat doubt how objective that was, and whether they had a serious historian to actually, properly learn about Drake's past, and the fact that he was the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe, and the fact that he helped England defeat the Armada. Like, all of those things are pretty impressive feats, really.
Are we not having the conversation? I mean, like, a lot of this stems from the summer of 2020, the killing of George Floyd, and there was a very knee-jerk reaction, wasn't there, across the country, where people were saying, well, let's eliminate elements of history that are problematic, and that's the phrase that they use all the time. Do you think things have got better? Are we able now to have the discussion, or are those discussions simply not being had?
I think discussions are being had, like on this programme, for example, but you know, I think it's a trend that doesn't seem to be slowing down. I mean, there's a whole load of London councils at the moment that are reviewing street names and changing names of streets named after people with extremely tenuous links to the slave trade. People like Gladstone, you know, and many others. And there's Gladstone Park, which they're considering renaming to something like Diane Abbott Park.
Well, that was because of Gladstone's father, actually. It wasn't because of Gladstone, it was because of his father's involvement with the flag. So it's even the sins of the fathers.
Exactly. We seem to be condemning people for what their fathers did, yeah.
But I mean, this to me makes absolutely no sense. But, you know, do you think there are people, because I haven't heard from them, people who are upset about the prospect of a primary school named after Drake? I mean, were there lots of complaints? Where did this come from?
I suppose I've spoken to people who have said, imagine being someone from an ethnic minority at the school, and basically your ancestors were enslaved by Drake and your school is named after him. And I can relate to that. But again, it kind of, if we have that treatment to everyone, then there'll be no one left to look at, because, you know, we will have chucked everything down the memory hole. So
absolutely. I mean, we are all the product of, or descended from, a mix of slavers and people who were enslaved, without a doubt. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it. So it's time for a break now, but in a few minutes we're going to be discussing the decision to scrap personal statements for young people who are applying to go to university. I'm going to be joined by an author who says that woke ideology is a threat to Jewish people. He's just written a book about it. And I'm going to find out about the man who gatecrashed an exhibition at an art gallery by pretending to be a serious art critic. I'll be seeing you in just a few minutes. Thank you.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. There's plenty more to come on Free Speech Nation this evening. But first, let's get a news update from Bethany.
Andrew, thank you. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Police are still searching for the gunman behind yesterday's suspected drive-by shooting in central London. A 7-year-old girl remains in a critical condition after being shot outside a church near Euston Station. 4 women and a second child, aged 12, were also taken to hospital, with one of them suffering life-changing injuries. Police say shots were fired from a moving black Toyota as mourners left a funeral service. They're appealing for witnesses to come forward. At least 68 people have been killed when a domestic plane crashed in Nepal, the country's worst aviation disaster in 3 decades. 72 people were on board the Yeti Airlines flight that crashed in Pokhara during clear skies. Those on board included passengers from India, Ireland, Australia and France. All but 4 of the bodies have been recovered. The search operation has been paused until tomorrow morning. The Labour leader says the NHS must reform or enter a period of managed decline. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Sir Keir Starmer said a Labour government would make GPs direct NHS employees rather than allowing them to run their own practices. He also spoke of getting rid of bureaucratic nonsense to allow patients to bypass GPs and self-refer themselves to specialists. A man has been arrested under terrorism laws after traces of uranium were found in a package at Heathrow Airport. Border Force officers detected the radioactive material in a shipment of scrap metal towards the end of December. Met Police confirmed there was no evidence the package posed a direct threat to the public. The man has been released on bail until April. At least 30 people have been killed and 30 more are being treated in hospital after a Russian missile hit an apartment building in central Ukraine. Rescue efforts are continuing, with officials saying a further 40 people could still be trapped under the rubble. Yesterday, Russia launched a major missile attack on Ukraine, striking vital energy facilities across the country. Authorities say the coming days will be difficult, with threats to the supply of electricity, water and heating during the height of winter. And the UK is facing nearly 200 flood warnings, with cold and wet conditions set to continue well into next week. The Met Office has issued several yellow weather warnings for ice across much of Scotland, Wales and the north of England. It's also warning motorists of difficult driving conditions as heavy snow falls in parts of the country. Temperatures are set to drop below 0 in most places overnight. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Free Speech Nation.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So we've had some questions emailed in to us. Thank you very much. The first one is from Caroline. She says, should the Church of England be paying reparations for its links to the slave trade? Josh, what do you think?
Well, so yes, I think it's 100 million that they've sort of put aside, and they're going to be, they're very careful. They're saying it's not reparations, it's going to be going to the communities that have been directly affected by slavery. The thing is, that they control £9 billion pounds.
Well, the Church of England at the moment?
Yeah, so
okay.
why don't we just give all of that money to everybody?
What, you're saying abolish the Church of England?
Look, I'm wearing a Star of David. I don't want to get in trouble here.
Yes, it sounds like religious hatred, Josh. What do you think there, Leo?
Yeah, no, this is nonsense. I think the church should be paying reparations to me for my ancestors who may or may not have ended the slave trade. And
it sounds very vague.
The British Navy went out and actually stopped the slave trade. Britain abolished slavery and then had to fight and had to lose soldiers and naval men to stop slavery happening.
That's right.
And sometimes had to fight the African leaders who wanted slavery to continue because they were making so much money from it.
It's very tricky, isn't it, when it comes to this issue of reparations? I mean, like you say, Josh, they're saying they're not giving reparations, they're donating it to communities that were affected. But when it comes to reparations, all of us are descended from a mix of people who were enslaved and people who did the slaving. And there will be no exceptions to that if you go back far enough. Reparations are very difficult to quantify, aren't they? And once you start, there's no real end to it, is there?
No, it's crazy. To make the point that you're saying, you know these TV shows where they've got like a descendant and it turns out their great-great-great-grandfather was this person or that. It's like one person. But actually, if you go back, I think it's 5 or 6 generations, we actually have something like 2,000 descendants, to draw upon. So the idea that this one person or not is going to dominate our genetic sphere is
it does seem very odd, but the Church of England seems to be in this at the moment, this sort of fashion of, well, this is a very woke thing, let's be honest. And they're really getting on board with that for some reason.
And it's virtue signalling. So it's 100 million from the 9 billion that they control. So that's like probably 1%. I don't know maths.
Your maths is really bad.
But it's probably about, something like that. I don't know. I'm doing my taxes this week, so I'm good with numbers right now. So, it's really just it's just something to gain a headline saying, look, this is some wonderful thing that we're doing.
Yeah, OK. Well, the next question is from James, and James has emailed in to say, do written personal statements for university applications unfairly benefit the rich? OK, so they're thinking of a video message might soon replace the personal statement. You remember that element of the UCAS form where you have to write about yourself for a few hundred words. I hated writing that personal statement. I remember that. It's not fun, but actually the challenge is kind of helpful, and it was certainly helpful in the interviews and that kind of thing. So what's going on here?
No, and I think it's a great idea because it helps weed out the working class applicants, so which we need more of.
There is a class issue here, isn't there? Because the counter argument to this is they're saying, well, look, the posh kids, they get tutors who are hired to sort of basically write it for them,
right?
And you think that's a good thing?
Well, yeah, because you want somebody who's going to approach a job with the same sort of. They're going to hire. They're going to hire people to help them with the job.
They're going to cheat.
Yeah, they're going to cheat. I mean, cheating is how we get a job done. So
I'm going to come to Josh for a serious answer at this point.
But you know what unfairly benefits the rich is being rich.
Right, exactly.
So, like, the idea that this is going to somehow make it more equal, no, because if they make it video questions, then rich people will get professional media personalities in, I'm available, who can then sort of tutor them how to give nice, succinct answers.
Well, not only that, but rich people are generally, they have confidence. I mean, I can always spot someone who grew up rich because they're just brimming with confidence.
Look, I went to public school, and there's no doubt that that's what you get. That inherent feeling of, it's not superiority, but it's this sort of like, I can do anything because you grew up with examples around you of people who did start their own businesses and whatnot. So you're not limited.
So you're saying that actually scrapping the personal statement is maybe a good thing?
Well, yeah, because there are arguments that, and we still live in a classist society, there's still biases, unconscious biases. Someone rocks up in the video interview and then, who's going to police what the person's thinking as they watch them?
But this whole thing, they're saying, we're going to do away with the personal statement because it's, it's not accessible. It's not accessible to all people. They don't have the means to do a personal statement. So we're going to replace it with multimedia. People do effectively a TikTok video or whatever, some sort of synchronized dance to a song that's repeated every 3 seconds. But how is that? How is having a camera and a microphone and lights and everything more accessible than having a pen and a bit of paper?
I mean, it's got a point there. I mean, that will benefit rich people too, right?
Yeah, it's all going to benefit. Yeah. The system is stacked for rich people.
It is.
It's almost as if rich people are better, and they got that money through being better, and their children are better than poor people's children.
For goodness sake, Leo, that is a ridiculous thing to say.
Everybody knows it's true.
Well, I don't believe a word you're saying.
Hi, Mum.
I'm going to move on to Charlie now. Charlie has emailed in and said, should schools maintain a strict dress code for teachers? And I am fully aware of what this is about because we've covered this story before. Kayla, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Kayla Lemur, who is a trans teacher in Canada who wears massive prosthetic plastic breasts when teaching students there. There we are.
Hoo-ha!
And this is a woodwork lesson. There's a danger there, surely, with those massive breasts and the electric saw. But of course, students are filming and taking pictures. Now, the most recent development is that, firstly, students were told that they might be suspended if they took pictures secretly. But now the school in question, Oakville Trafalgar High School, has said they might bring in a dress code. Josh, surely a teacher should have I couldn't have worn fetish gear to school as a teacher.
But is the dress code going to be like... I mean, what kind of dress is going to be able to cover those?
Right, well, there is that.
So it doesn't... Dress code wouldn't necessarily mean not wearing prosthetic breasts. It might be like you have to cover her nipples, whatever.
Or wear a ball gown to sort of cover...
Yeah, some sort of big...
taffeta ball gown,
whatever. So,
but the thing about this is, I mean, look, clearly that's a fetish. Clearly that. I mean, that's not...
Well, that's very transphobic, Andrew.
It is absolutely not
That is a real woman. That is a real woman and has actually put a lot more of effort into being a real woman
It costs
than
£2,000.
some of the other real women. So, you know, we saw in the gallery when the SNP passed their gender reform bill, there were some other real women there who just looked like this without the prosthetic breast, to be honest.
So the thing about this is what I did enjoy when the person from the school, I think it was the deputy headmaster or something, came out and defended and said, but this is who she is. This is no, it's not. These are massive prosthetic breasts.
But have we ever uncovered whether this was trolling or not?
Well, no, I think it's
genuine.
It is
now?
Genuine. So for a while we all thought, no, this teacher is trolling.
It was a genius way of proving the point.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are who you say you are, or whatever, and he or she was living it.
She, you bigot.
I love that Leo's become the morality police here. It's really good. Anyway, we're going to move on now if we've got another question. This is from Isla, and Isla says, would you live next door to a cricket club if you were scared of the ball being hit into your garden? This is Coal Hill Cricket Club in Dorset, and they were facing the threat of closure because there were complaints from people in nearby houses when cricket balls went over into their houses. England captain Ben Stokes has joined a campaign to save the club, which was founded 118 years ago, and they've now got to raise £35,000 to apparently pay for netting to protect the neighbouring properties. But Leo, surely I would know, I mean, if I was buying a house and it was behind a cricket club, I would know that the odd cricket ball might come my way.
Yeah, and we see that, I mean, the scourge of the UK is NIMBYism. So, you know, people buy houses next to pubs and then demand that the pub stops making any noise or serving any drinks.
Yeah.
And we've seen this happening here with this cricket pitch. I mean, cricket is a horrible, boring game. It's punishment. It's punishment for being English.
I mean, the days they last for days, don't they? Cricket matches, weeks.
When we talk about closure, what we really want is closure on a game of cricket.
Yeah.
So we find out the actual score before we all die of old age.
Are you a fan of cricket, Josh?
I'm not. I do understand they've actually raised the money.
Oh, they have.
You know, but yeah, I just anytime I read about people with gardens, I just get angry.
Have you not got a garden?
I don't have a garden. No,
right.
and I don't. I mean, I wish I lived in an area that had a cricket club.
For you to complain about?
No, so I'd be like, oh, I'm in a rich area.
Yeah, there is that. Does sound like a rich area. We've got another question now from Steve, and this is quite short and sweet. He says, is Britpop coming back? So apparently, two of the biggest bands of the 90s are reuniting this summer. That's Blur. Blur's going to play 2 shows at Wembley Stadium, and Pulp are going to play loads of outdoor gigs and festivals as well. Were you a fan of Britpop?
Yeah, to a degree.
Do you think it should come back? Do you think it's of its time? You know, it feels like it's
part of the whole movement of the 90s coming back, and it's sort of it's unnerving because the fact that I'm old enough for something to come back.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Weird.
But I understand fashion's coming back, and maybe like the style coming back. But these are the actual bands.
The actual
just
people.
reforming.
Yeah, but look, Blur's a great band, and Pulp's a pretty good band.
And they're still going, are they?
Well, I think they're coming back for the summer as well.
And apparently the Oasis are...
they can stay, they can...
But Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher are two of the biggest acts at the moment in terms of live performances. I mean, didn't Liam Gallagher just recently do Nebworth, and it was a huge...
Yeah.
Are you a fan of these people?
Yeah, I grew up with Britpop and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's depressing when bands reform and then you see how old they are now, and then you realise that you're old as well.
So this is really an existential question about mortality, isn't it? Yeah. Although, do you remember we used to take them so seriously? Like that conflict between Blur and Oasis, who would get to #1? Would it be Country House or Roll With It? That was on the mainstream news. It was on like the
front page.
It was front page of
because it was a glorious time in human civilization where we'd had the end of history and we'd abolished sort of nasty things like wars in Ukraine and racism and things like that. So now that all those things or complaining about those things has come back in a big way, I don't know. Maybe this is going to heal everything. We can go back to worrying about stupid stuff again.
Well, I would love them to bring Technotronic back. I was very much into my Belgian house, that kind of thing. Me? Okay.
I worked in a cheesecake factory with the lead singer of Technotronic.
No way, Yaki K?
Yeah, his job was to pump up the jam.
OK. I'm going to put a stop to this. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the author who says that woke ideology leads to anti-Semitism. See you in 3 minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A leading Jewish author says woke ideology leads to anti-Semitism. David L. Bernstein has written a book called Woke Anti-Semitism: How a Progressive Ideology Harms Jews. In England and Wales, there was a 49% increase in the number of hate crimes against Jewish people that were reported to police in the 12 months up to last March. I'm delighted to say that David joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for being with you.
So this is the book. I just want to hold it up here. This is the book, Woke Anti-Semitism. Now, a lot of people will be confused, I suppose, because the word woke has become quite nebulous and people don't really know what it means. What do you mean by woke when you talk about it?
So when I say woke, I mean 2 things. One is that
racism and oppression are embedded in the very structures of society. They're like the air we breathe.
Right.
And the second claim is that only people with lived experience who have experienced oppression are qualified to define it for the rest of society.
Yes.
Now, both of those things can be true. It can be true that racism or oppression are embedded in the very structures of society, and it can be true that as a person who's, let's say, suffered oppression, that you have an insight that other people should hear. But they're not always true. And that second claim sometimes weaponizes the first and is used to sort of, and it becomes the source of really cancel culture. And also, I would argue, forms of anti-Semitism.
And when we talk about anti-Semitism, in this country, recently a comedian called David Baddiel wrote a book called Jews Don't Count.
Just had coffee with him a couple
Oh, well,
days
there we
ago.
go, fantastic. And so you will know that his thesis is that actually many people on the left who would either self-identify as woke or who we would refer to as woke because they have a belief in those kind of power structures or the value of lived experience, they have a kind of blind spot when it comes to anti-Semitism. They're very good at sort of detecting racism, homophobia, transphobia in various places, often where it doesn't exist. But they won't do that when anti-Semitism actually does exist.
Exactly. So this ideology equates power and privilege with success, with economic success. And that's going to always end up bad for the Jews, as we like to say. Jews are, on average, more successful in the United States and the UK than the rest of the population. And that means that they're going to be viewed as being privileged. And I think that's inherently problematic. That's going to almost always lead to anti-Semitism. The other thing that you're seeing is when you attach identity to privilege in a general sense, in other words, black people are always going to be more oppressed or white people are always going to be the oppressors, no matter what, you're going to see Jews and Jewish privilege attached to their identity. And I think that's leading to this new variant of anti-Semitism that we're seeing.
To what extent do you think that the singular emphasis on skin colour and race has distorted the debate? I mean, recently we had Whoopi Goldberg saying, I mean, you know, this has been talked about a lot, but she made the claim that the Holocaust was about white people bullying other white people. You know.
Right. And, you know, obviously she's taking an American conception of race, as we've defined it in America, and acting as if Nazis saw Jews as being white. Nazis did not see Jews as being white. They saw Jews as being a race.
Yes.
And so I think that just the whole emphasis on whiteness is problematic. Andrew Sullivan likes to talk about how demonization of white people leads to demonization of Jews. When you believe that a group is all powerful and they're responsible for all the oppression in society, it's not a very far leap to then say that Jews are also white, and they've been defined as white, whether we like it or not, and that they're part of the oppressive class. In fact, sometimes Jews are even characterized as hyper-white.
But it's very difficult to understand, isn't it? Because if you are a social justice activist, if you are someone who prides yourself on standing up for people who have been downtrodden and oppressed, well, surely the example of Jewish people in our recent history is the most obvious example of oppression. I mean, the Holocaust is obviously the most horrendous thing that happened in the 20th century. So why is it they can't see that? What is it that stops them?
Yeah, and by the way, I come from the left. I'm a social justice activist my entire professional life. I've been part of the Jewish community that is trying to make change. I believe in immigrant rights. I believe in criminal justice reform. I believe in many of the issues that the people who are woke supposedly care about as well. But the problem is that they can't get beyond the idea that Jews are successful on average. Ibram X. Kendi talks about disparity and says that if any population that is below the mean on average, by definition, they are being oppressed. And that also means that any population above the mean is part of the oppressor class. It is complicit in oppression. So you have Asian Americans and even Nigerian Americans, by the way, who are succeeding in American life. And I think that they're all susceptible to being viewed as the oppressor, and they're all subject to this new form of racism.
Do you think, I mean, I've often made the case that I don't think that this can be reduced to a question of left wing versus right wing. And actually the woke ideology kind of is neither, or as complicated matters so that people think it's about left versus right, but actually it's not.
It shouldn't be. I mean, the fact that I clearly have left-wing views on a lot of policy issues should mean that I'm welcomed into the left-wing tent, but I'm not. And I'm not by many of the people that I've worked with for many years. As soon as you take a different position on these complex social dynamics, all of a sudden now you're considered sort of Trump adjacent or you know alt-right adjacent. I've even heard alt-center recently.
Alt-center? I haven't heard that one.
Alt-center, yes.
Okay.
So you know, and I've stopped worrying about it. You know, I believe what I believe, and I'll support the causes I support, and I'll vote for the people I vote for. But and you can tell, like any social movement that tries to define people outside, any political movement that wants to define people outside of it, you can tell is sick. I mean, that's a problem. You know, why wouldn't you want to expand your ranks? Wouldn't you want to work with more people on issues like criminal justice reform in the United States?
Yes.
And not establish a litmus test to keep people out? That's what's happening, Tam.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tribalism going on. I know from personal experience that people on the left who take a critical view of the woke ideology are automatically branded right-wing, or even worse than that, far-right or something like that. And it just seems, a lot of it is kind of historical illiteracy, isn't it? And just not understanding.
I think that, and I think we're living in a time of great, what political scientists call political sorting. People are feeling much more politically tribalistic than they have in the past, and we're being sort of pushed into these very narrow ideological definitions that I don't think really serve us well, and it's preventing us from talking to each other and solving problems.
To what, can you give us some examples or some instances of how anti-Semitism in the US, in some areas, has been increasing?
Yeah, so we're seeing it on all sides. So you see it on the right. And by the way, it's happening because there are ideologies and conspiracy theories, really simplistic explanations that are sort of finding their way in all the ideological camps. So you have the Great Replacement theory in the United States, which holds that immigrants are replacing ordinary Americans, and guess who's doing the replacing? Jews. So that is a source of anti-Semitism on the right. You also have, of course, an Islamist version of anti-Semitism, too, that you see in certain sectors, and especially on college campuses. That's giving rise to a variant of anti-Semitism. You have a black supremacist version that holds that, for example, that black people are the real Jews and the Jews have stolen the covenant.
Yeah.
And then you have what I would call woke anti-Semitism or radical social justice anti-Semitism, and that views the Jews as part of the oppressor class. And that's really what's giving rise to anti-Semitism, really on all sides, all at once.
Do you think that the reason why woke anti-Semitism, which is what you outline in your book, is on the rise, is because those who identify as woke take the view that they can't possibly be prejudiced? They're not capable of that because they're the good guys.
Yeah. The first clue I had was going back 20 years ago, and I heard the phrase, racism equals prejudice plus power. And I remember hearing it the first time, and I thought to myself, so that means if I'm viewed as a part of the powerful class, that I can't be a victim, and somebody who's considered part of the victim class can't be a victimizer.
Yes.
And I knew that was problematic, and I wrote about it 20 years ago. And said, if this really catches on, we're in trouble. And I think that's exactly what's happening.
That's really interesting, because that idea of redefining racism as an equation, prejudice plus power, that's now the standard sort of intersectional definition of the term. But it's also come into dictionaries. Merriam-Webster, for instance, changed their definition of racism to include that element of privilege and power and those kind of things. But that's not what it means, and that's certainly not the way...
It shouldn't mean that.
No.
It shouldn't mean that. It should mean that when you're prejudiced against a group, you should be considered a racist.
So why has that taken hold so much? Why has the intersectional movement become so powerful in all of our major institutions, to the extent that they can have a dictionary definition changed?
Yeah, it's really amazing to sort of look back. I mean, it was in 1968 when you had this real takeover of certain universities. It was often called the Long March Through Institutions.
Yeah.
And it was, as you put it before, it was really confined to the university for many, many years. But you started, even in like the late 1990s, early 2000s, you started to see it in the corporate sector. You started to see it in institutional life. And it was growing and growing. And in 2014, I was the head of a campus-oriented organization. I remember almost overnight, you could feel the difference in the campus environment. And it just, from there, it got worse and worse. And obviously, George Floyd was a tipping point in the discourse. And it just transformed overnight, almost, the discourse in America. And I think a lot of people just caved at that point.
Yes.
You know, if you were holding off on a diversity, equity, inclusion program, a coercive version of that, you might have then caved at that point, because there was just so much pressure. And I call this identitarian deference. It's when you defer to another group who has authority to define the world for you. And I think that's very problematic. I know you actually write about that as well. And you saw it in institutions. You saw it in Jewish organizations as well. after George Floyd that they said, well, you know what, we're really not in a place where we can articulate this for the rest of society, so we'll hire a new DEI coordinator or consultant, and we'll just defer to them. And once you sign on that dotted line of deference, you really have very little room of maneuverability.
Yeah, they become the kind of clergy, and they get to decide absolutely everything. Can I ask you, David, as well, about the differences between America and the UK? I mean, over here, the Labour Party has had all sorts of issues with anti-Semitism. There have been scandals there. Is there anything comparable in America?
Well, there is. In one sense, the UK has been worse off considering the role that Corbyn played in Labour. In another sense, I think wokeness itself and this ideology has really gone much deeper and much further in American society than it has in UK. By the way, Canada is even worse because there's no opposing political force in Canada. So, so it's just moving freely throughout institutions and capturing institutions. But I don't think the United States or the Democratic Party is susceptible immediately to a Corbyn-like figure because Democratic voters are still relatively moderate. There's not that many AOCs or Ilhan Omars being elected. They're still having to win over a larger swath of their districts. So I don't think we're in immediate danger of Corbynization. But look, 10 more years of this ideology untamed, who knows what it's going to be like?
Well, I mean, Biden was elected on the idea that he was the non-woke candidate. But so much of what he's actually done would suggest that isn't necessarily true. And that maybe he is quite susceptible to the squad, you know, those people who have had connections with anti-Semitic people.
I speak with members of Congress and people who work with members of Congress, and the sense that I have is that even though these members are still being elected, moderate members, they're always looking over their left shoulder. They're always worried about that energy coming from that woke core of the party, and so they're factoring in how they think and how they vote. I think that's a problem, and I think Biden is doing just that.
Just finally, because we don't have much time, Dave, but how do we combat the rise of this woke ideology? As you say, in Canada, when there is no opposition to it, it does run riot, and there's nothing you can do. So how do we do this when there's so many misunderstandings about, for a start, what it means?
Yeah, well, first of all, I believe that the vast majority of people don't buy into it. And we have polling that shows that. So the first thing we have to do is help people become courageous. Courage catches on. And the other thing that we can do is start building new coalitions of people from sort of the center left and center right who are opposing extremism on the far right and are opposing extremism on the far left. There are ethnic communities, Indian Americans and Indian Brits, I'm sure, and there are Asian Chinese Americans and Chinese Brits, and there are Jewish Americans and Jewish Brits, and they can start to work together, and they're black voices, heterodox voices in both countries. I've met some Nigerian voices that are extremely concerned about the current ideological state. We can start to work together and create a new sort of political vibe in our countries.
David Bernstein, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And this is the book. It's called Woke Anti-Semitism, and this is available to buy right now. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by the man who gatecrashed a party at an art gallery by claiming to be a critic. I'll be back in 3 minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines.
It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So, have you ever wanted to go to a private party at an art gallery? Well, my next guest was dared to do that, and amazingly, he managed to pull it off. James Bembridge told the doorman at a gallery in Shoreditch in East London that he was an art critic and he was waved through. James is the deputy editor of A Country Squire magazine. He joins me now. James, welcome to the show. So, why on earth did you want to go to this exhibition?
Well, I didn't want to. I was just, as you say, dared into it.
Right.
And I'm not one to turn down a dare. And,
no, of course.
And so, you know, I thought, well, why not? I'll try it. And I think it was just really due to the kind of bohemian way that I dress and slightly vaguely fruity accent that I got in. And so...
So you weren't on the list?
I wasn't on the list, no. So when I went to the doorman, he said, "So, sorry, my friend, you're not on the list." And I said, and I repeated my name in as arrogant a tone as I could summon, and said, "James Bembridge is in the Art Critic." And he actually believed it and said, "Oh, of course, Miss Bembridge, this way, this way."
So it's just confidence?
So, yeah, confidence, yeah.
Now, what kind of exhibition was this, just to give us some sense?
Modern art one. Yeah.
OK, so the kind of thing... I think we've got an image of the kind of thing that was at this exhibition. There we go. Beautiful. Now, very powerful piece, that. So, now, I hate to sound cynical, and I do like to defend artists, but there are some elements of conceptual modern art that I just think, you know, if you compare that to Michelangelo's David, where are you going?
And I'm not opposed to modern art in every sense, but, you know, so one of the pieces in this gallery was that depicted a sort of man in Mickey Mouse ears with his tongue hanging out like a rutting mutt. And I was thinking, well, Mickey is the artist almost admitting to taking the Mickey. And I think that some of them are. And it was just, I lasted there about 20 minutes or so before they caught on to the fact that I wasn't, in fact, an art critic.
But you also got into conversations about the art, and you don't know anything about modern art, do you?
No, I just blagged it.
How do you blag it? I mean, like, so, for instance, if you were seeing that the blue lines, squiggles on the canvas, how do you, you know, comment on that in a way that sounds learned?
Well, the thing is, Andrew, that I'd had probably 5 glasses of the free champagne that they were offering.
And that helps, does it?
Yes, it did help a lot.
Yes.
And so there was this one woman who said something like, what did she say? "Oh, James, how did you get into the art business?" or something like that. And I said, "Oh," and again, I was blagging it, and I said something like, "Oh, well, darling, one doesn't get into the art business. Art invades itself into every pore and fibre of our being. Art is all of our business." And she said, "Oh, wow, that really touches me." And that kind of set the intellectual tone of the evening.
So, James, what's going on here? Is this just pure mischief, or do you have a satirical point here?
No, it was just pure mischief.
I was just mischief. OK, fine. I just wonder whether
I might as well be honest.
You were trying to make a comment about art criticism generally and how there's a level of fraudulence that goes on within it.
Well, you know, what happened was, when they finally... So, what happened was, eventually, it was all going fine, it was all going well. They all believed I was an art critic. And then, unfortunately, one woman said, "James, as an art critic, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this piece, that piece that you just showed, the blue squiggle." And so I had this sort of court of loyal followers now, like 12 of them behind me, clinging to my arse like lice without realising that was the organ from which I spoke. And I thought, well, what do I do now? I mean, what are my real thoughts on this piece? I mean, I thought it was as hideous an example of postmodern, pukey garbage as can be imagined. And so then what did I say? Something like, oh, well, it's... no, first of all, I tried to get out of it. So I said, well, I like to keep my thoughts to my writing. And then one woman protested, saying, oh, you know, we're all very discreet in here. You can say it. And so I thought, oh, God, OK, fine. So I said something like, well, clearly it's self-referential. You know, the artist is a confession piece of sorts. The artist is saying he's more in love with the idea of art than the practice itself. Where did that come from? What did it mean? Buggered if I know, but, you know, it was met with muted murmurs of approval.
Well, people found what you said interesting and insightful.
Yes, oh, yeah, well, I don't know.
Or at least they were being polite enough to pretend that they found it insightful.
Well, yes, they were nodding along to it.
OK.
But then, so I was about to leave, and then one woman began Googling me. And she said, James, I can see that you're a writer, but you don't seem to write about art. And, in fact, you seem to have written some horrible, misogynistic things about Emily Maitlis. And then, of course, cue waves of horror and indignation. And then...
you were kicked out?
Well, then the gallerist said, your name will be mud. And I said, well, it's already several layers below that, madam. And then...
Do you feel at all bad about misleading people, though? I mean, it is deception, isn't it?
Well, I said, what is the bigger deception? Me passing myself off as an art critic, or you passing this battery acid swill off as champagne? You know.
There is a serious comment, though, to be made here about conceptual art, and sometimes I do get very frustrated because I do think there are a lot of talented artists working today, but I think there's a lot of bilge which passes as art, which has no merit at all, if I'm honest. I mean, there was that case in Italy where the cleaner in a modern art gallery tidied up an artwork because she thought it was garbage.
There's so many stories like that. I mean, I think, didn't someone go into, I mean, outside the Tate Gallery or something, the builders removed art there thinking it was garbage.
Well, exactly. So if that can happen, you know, then something has gone wrong in art generally. I mean, is that a fair point, do you think?
I think it's a fair point. And, you know, Andrew, when I was at university, I was studying so-called fine art. It was anything but fine art. You know, it was all Tracy Emin, Damien Hirst, you know, trash like that.
Oh, so you were studying art? You have some expertise then?
Yeah, I suppose that's how I kind of blagged my way through that gallery party.
Yes, I see. So what do you think has happened? Why is there this decline? I mean, I know Roger Scruton has written about Duchamp and how his urinal was meant to be a joke, but now artists sort of repeat that same thing as though it is the equivalent of a Cellini.
Well, I think the postmodernist art movement is similar to postmodernist writers. They just want to... They don't want the lower orders of the you know, they want to keep it exclusive, and they don't want the lower orders to go in that sphere.
Well, there's elitism is tied to this.
Completely, yeah.
And you think that that's part of the criticism, as well as the Satchys of the world and the people who produce the art itself? That they are effectively finding a way to create a domain that only those who are in can
that's it. And it's a complete joke. I mean, most of them don't even believe in it themselves. It's just a way to remove themselves, as I said, from the lower orders of society.
OK. And you don't feel at all bad about deceiving the people? No?
No, I had a great time doing it, and I'd happily do it again. In fact, what I was going to do next was trying to infiltrate this kind of North London dinner party sect, although I don't think I can do that now, because most people would know.
I think they would know, wouldn't they? Yes. Or at least that's what they Google you like they did at the gallery on your phone. Well, good luck with your undercover work.
Thank you.
And you do come back and tell us about it. James Bembridge, everyone. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be looking at the best social media videos of the week, and the panel will try to solve your problems in unfiltered dilemmas. Do not go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
On Mark Dolan tonight, one of the most important figures in British politics, the leader of the DUP, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. In My Big Opinion monologue, as teachers prepare to go on strike, have young people not suffered enough after 2 years of school closures? In My Take at 10, is MP Andrew Bridgen right to raise vaccine concerns? Plus the papers, my all-star panel, and in the big question, is Kenneth Clarke right that the Conservatives need a break from power? I'll be asking Tory legend Anne Widdecombe. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Now, every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. And we're going to start with a video of Rishi Sunak's trip to Scotland this week. He was interviewed by STV's political editor, Colin McKay. And it's fair to say the two men didn't really want to talk about the same topic. Let's have a look.
But that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you about the possibility of a de facto referendum in the next general election, which is what the First Minister is proposing. You spoke to her about it last night. Would you accept the outcome of that?
We didn't talk about the next general election. What we did talk about, though, is the things that we can do to deliver for people here in Scotland by working constructively together. And today's announcement of 2 new free ports...
But you're completely ignoring my question, which is about the possibility of the next general election being a de facto referendum. Would you accept the outcome of that?
What I'm focused on...
I know, but that's not what I'm asking you, what you're focused on. I'm asking you to focus on this, because there's a lot of people in Scotland who are very interested in this. Would you accept the outcome of a de facto referendum?
Do you know what? I was out all of yesterday evening, I've been out all of today, and what people are talking to me about is what we can do to actually make their lives better in the here and now.
You're just not going to talk about what they're talking about. You're just going to ignore my question.
I mean, it is kind of frustrating, isn't it, Josh, when politicians just don't answer the question. It's like that time when Jeremy Paxman got that, was it Michael Howard? He asked him the same question 17 times.
But the difference between this interview is that I feel like Sunak is genuinely afraid that he's going to headbutt him.
Oh, right, yeah, there is that element.
I don't know if racist towards Scottish people, but there was this... Okay,
Well,
fine.
but-
I am being racist, right?
Imagine if I
But
said, I was worried Josh was going to count all the money and control the media. You know what I mean?
well, look, it's just the way. If you look, watch that video with the sound off, it's like Richard Sunak's just like, don't ever, and he's just going.
So maybe Josh's point. Maybe it was Sunak's anti-Scottish prejudice.
No, not at all. No, what's happening here, the STV, which is what ITV's called in Scotland for some reason, even the television's gone independent, STV are in the pocket of the SNP. They're never this critical, never this attacking with the SNP, but because the SNP put ads and, the Scottish Government places all these ads on STV, STV know that they've got to play it safe, play nice with the SNP and then attack the Conservatives.
That's interesting context. So I didn't realise that. So you don't think that guy, Colin McKay, would be like this with Nicola Sturgeon?
Not at all. He'd be like, oh dear Lord, oh dear mammy dearest,
But I do think there's a
like
place...
some Castro bootlick.
But I think there is a place for, interviewers, particularly when it comes to politicians, because they have to be held to account.
Totally, but in this case, it just was a bit aggressive.
You think it was a bit much?
Well, he was like interrupting and really making a point of it. And you can see him thinking, it's going to go viral, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, so you think that's what it was about? Okay.
And it's paying no respect to the Prime Minister.
I'm not bothered about that.
No, OK. All right, well, let's move on to the next video. Now, this was recorded by a teacher in the United States who identifies as non-binary. And this is from a primary school. So this is kids as young as 5. They're learning about pronouns, some of them including A and M and G and J and all that nonsense. Let's have a look.
We usually start with this book, which I absolutely love. It introduces a variety of pronouns as well as multiple pronouns that someone might use. There's also a great video on amaze.org that goes into pronouns and how to respect people's pronouns. All these lessons are done in our morning meeting or in our ELA time because they're connected with writing and with reading. And they hit all our standards. This year's chart is a little wonky, but all of these are from the students. The description and definition I help them with, but then the what to say and how to correct comes explicitly from them. And as you can see, it hangs up on our social justice wall right behind me. And then the infamous llamacorn and narwhal is what we move into. So we actually practice the sayings they came up with using the stuffed animals.
So that social justice wall has a lot of stuff on it. Josh, I mean, how do they get time to do any actual lessons?
Well, let me just quickly check out my social justice wall.
Exactly.
It's disgusting. It's child abuse. It's someone teaching non-teaching stuff. It's insane. And I know that, we're going to get people angry and, let's get people motivated and stuff like that. You just watch that stuff. This is teaching little kids.
They're 5.
It's this ridiculousness.
The multiple pronouns, it's not just he, she,
It's
and
made up
it's
stuff.
made up stuff.
They're trying to learn. Just teach them just the basics. That's what you just want to do. And it's really frustrating.
Well, all right, Grandad. I think you'll find that Z, them, and Ater, they're really useful pronouns for people, and it's really important we teach kids these pronouns.
If you watch Star Trek.
Instead of teaching them, maths or English or one of those, white supremacist colonial.
Can I ask you, Leah, have you ever met anyone with Zhejiang pronouns or Zhezhe pronouns?
In China.
I just don't know where these people are. I see them on TikTok all the time. These people put these videos up. But have you ever had to use?
If I recognise, if one of my kids' teachers put up a video like that, I would be protesting outside the school the next day.
Well, the thing about it wouldn't be legal here, would it? Because it's an ideological thing. It would be against the Education Act, I think. Is that not right?
They'd still do it.
They'd probably still do it, absolutely, because they think they're on the right side of history. But it is frustrating, and at some point, surely... And there are loads of these. The problem with this is we could say, well, it's just a rogue teacher, right? But there are so many of these videos, you kind of think, maybe homeschooling isn't such a bad idea.
And they always look like that. They're always really obvious. You know how Jimmy Savile, dressed like an obvious... it was so obvious, you know what I mean? Same with these people. They're obviously not going to do a good job teaching your kids. So if you go in your kids' school and you see teachers that look like that, homeschool your kids.
But the thing about it is, I was a teacher, as you know, and I get the temptation when you've got a captive audience to push your politics onto them. So it's, but you don't. You just don't. You sort of you play devil's advocate. You talk about various views. This is a political view. This is an ideological view. And if you're just saying this is the only way that we can talk about this, then that's not teaching.
Did you see how complicated that was? That wall and all the different things. How confused these poor kids are.
They've just learnt their ABC. And now they have to learn Xi, Zhem and Zhe. It's just an absolute nightmare. Feel for the children. Anyway, it's a part of the show we're going to talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. Thank you so much for emailing in your various problems. Some of them were a bit too disgusting, so we didn't include them. But here's one from Bill in Liverpool. Bill says, I've been in charge of my company for almost 30 years. Almost everyone wants me to leave, but I've told them that they've had good times with me and I should stay in the job. What should I do? Well, it sounds like Bill isn't particularly popular. But do you think Bill is right and everyone else is wrong? That he's actually a really great guy?
Everybody thinks that they're a great person, but I don't know. I think democracy means you take the majority position.
Yeah, but everyone hates you here, and you stick around.
That's a lie. That's fake news. No, I think Bill. Like you got to listen to what
do you think, Paul Bill?
Is this communism? He said he started the company, or he's in charge of it.
Yes.
And why don't just fire them all? What are you doing, Bill?
OK, well look, thank you ever so much. Bill, I hope that helps. I don't think it does. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when the Church of England decided to make amends for the slave trade. Some idiot tried to take J.K. Rowling's name off her books, and the Brit Awards managed to annoy everybody in the name of progress. Thank you to my wonderful panel, Leo Kurz and Josh Howie. And of course, to my guests this evening, we've had Professor Robert Wintermute, Ella Whelan, Harry Howard, David L. Bernstein, and James Bembridge. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Look on the screen right now and you can see the website address that you need to go to. It's www.sroaudiences.com. Come along. We've got free wine and free booze and vol-au-vents and all that kind of thing. So do join us. And the show's really good too, so you may as well just come for that. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. And don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians talk you through the next day's top news stories. Thanks so much for watching Free Speech Nation. See you next week.
Hello again. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday, but looking ahead weather-wise, and it's going to remain cold. There'll be snow for some of us, but also quite a bit of winter sunshine to look forward to as well. The reason for the cold weather is this area of low pressure to the east of us. That's allowing for our winds to come from the north, so cold Arctic air plunging across the UK, which is why it's going to be so cold. Notice this weather system waiting out in the west. That's going to fringe south coastal parts as we go through Sunday night. Otherwise, for many through Sunday night, yes, there'll be some clear spells. Also, some showery rain, sleet or snow across some northern parts could lead to something of an ice risk here. And snow showers piling in from the north across parts of Scotland. These totals could build up as we go through the night. It is going to be a cold night, even in the south, some places falling below freezing, could get as low as -10 in the sheltered parts of Scotland. The rain, sleet and snow across parts of the southeast could cause some problems early doors, but that will clear away as we go through the morning. Otherwise then through Monday, for many it is going to be largely dry with lots of winter sunshine around. Yes, there'll be some showers towards the east and also plenty of showers towards parts of Scotland, and here they are readily going to be falling as snow. But for many, largely dry with sunny spells. Despite that though, it's cold, colder than today for most places, generally staying in mid-single figures Celsius. Little change for many as we go through Monday evening, and so most places staying largely clear, but continue to see snow showers across parts of Scotland, and then some showery rain, sleet and snow starting to push in from the southwest as we go through the night. Need to keep an eye on this because there could be some significant snow across some southwestern parts as we go through the early hours of Tuesday. It is going to be a colder night than this coming night for many, could even get as low as -11 or -12 perhaps in the sheltered glens of Scotland. Through Tuesday then, a cold, frosty, icy start for many of us first thing. Watch out for this showery rain, sleet and snow across southern parts. A little bit of uncertainty regarding how much snow we're going to see, but it is worth keeping up to date with that. There'll be further wintry weather as we go through the rest of the week, perhaps drier on Thursday, but staying cold. Bye-bye for now. See you later.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online, this is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion monologue, as teachers prepare to go on strike, have young people not suffered enough after 2 years of school closures? My